welcome everyone. This is our first in our quarterly series for 2022. We're calling it Courage and Curiosity. And our first event is called Holistic Time Management with our operations manager and a stellar professional organizer, Alissa Fuchs. So let me tell you a little bit about Alissa, and then at the end, we'll tell you a little bit about Big Rocks organizing and why we love doing what we're doing. So Alissa has a background. She has a BA from UC Davis. Let me pull it up and read it. I always get a little bit nervous and then I feel like I stumble. So here, bear with me just one moment, please. Alissa has a BA in sociology with a concentration in social services. Her background includes social work, special education, activity and event planning, and ABA therapy. Her past work as a behavioral therapist informs her work as an organizer, giving her insight into what organizational systems will work well and be easy to maintain for an individual based on their brain wiring, habits, lifestyle, and preferences. Alissa began organizing in 2018 and joined the Big Rocks team in 2020. She's a former member of NAPO and has volunteered on the NAPO Oregon Resource Committee. She wishes to help others simplify their lives and find time for the people and experiences they love. Alissa moved to Portland in 2007. She's from the Bay Area and loves living in the Pacific Northwest. She's an avid cyclist and reader and also enjoys dancing, cooking, and playing board games with friends. She lives with her partner, Chris, and their ever-growing collection of plants. So welcome, Alissa. We're so excited to be on this journey with you today.
Thank you, Whitney. Yes, so my name is Alissa, and I'm so glad to see all of you here this evening. And I want to wish everyone a happy new year, happy 2022. Okay, so we're talking about a new year and how it's a time to reflect and reassess. And, you know, we really want to reassess our goals and see if we're actually meeting them. We want to think about who we want to be going forward. And more importantly, how do we get there? You know, we can't just have a goal, we need to have a plan. So let's talk about holistic time management. So when I say holistic time management, well, let me back up. I think a lot of times when you hear or read something about time management, it's couched solely in terms of your productivity. So it's either about getting things done at work or maybe getting things done at home, you know, your chores, your tasks, your to-do list. But the reality is we live these full, rich lives, and we have to think about all of those things. We can't view just one part of our life in isolation. So we have, as you can see from these pictures, you know, we have our relationships, we have our hobbies, we have our dreams and passions, as well as the work aspect of our life. And they are all interconnected. And we need to make space for all of it. The work, the play, the chores, the relaxation, the rejuvenation, all of those things. So that's thinking about our time holistically. And it's not just about the quantity of time we have, it's also about the quality of that time. Because you need to think about what energy and motivation are you bringing to each of these tasks? And is it the right time of day for that task? You know, can you focus on it? Can you do your best at that time? So we're thinking about these interconnected elements, you know, because what you do at the beginning of your day will affect how you feel and what you can do at the end of your day. And that rolls over into your week, to your months, to your years. So we want to think about this holistic picture of our lives and how do we fit it all in? Okay, so I'm going to drop some hard truth on you. And, you know, we all know this, but before we move forward, we need to accept that time as we perceive and measure it is finite. We're not getting into the metaphysical here. We're talking about, you know, 24 hours in a day, 16 hours of those are waking hours. That's what we have to work with, right? And I know there's a quote floating around that, you know, we all have the same 24 hours. I'm going to call BS on that. because, I think there are people who have a lot of help, who have people who can, help with cleaning, with childcare, with work tasks, all those different things. And those people effectively have more usable time than someone who's trying to do it all themselves. So when you think about your 24 hours, think about your particular 24 hours. What are you responsible for? And I know that oftentimes we can fall into the trap where we try to, do it all. And that's not just an individual thing, that's a cultural construct. We really revere people who have packed, busy schedules and who, seem to be perfect workers and perfect parents and perfect hosts all rolled into one, the whole package. But realistically, we can't do it all, even if we had multiple lifetimes. And thinking about it that way, when you try to take on too much, it often leads to burnout. And unfortunately, when you reach that burnout stage, that affects everything else in your life. So it's not just affecting your work, it's affecting your relationships, it's affecting the energy you bring to all the tasks and experiences of your life. And that can lead us to maybe blame ourselves or feel like we've failed. But in reality, it's just that you've set yourself up with an impossible task. So instead of trying to compare ourselves to, the super achievers, know that, they have tons of support. They have a TV crew behind the scenes. They have a cadre of assistants. There's so much that you don't see going on behind the scenes that is helping them to achieve all that they achieve. So when you compare yourself to someone, compare yourself to yourself. So think about where you were last year, or maybe let's cross the last 2 years off because those were kind of extraordinary. But when you think about yourself years ago in comparison to where you are now, have you learned anything? Have you grown? Have you picked up a new habit or skill? All of these things, even if they're small, these are accomplishments. That's progress, and you should celebrate it. So let's start there. Let's start by thinking about, let's start with that standard of judgment, judging how far you've come, not comparing yourself to someone else who may have a different sort of structure of their time. Okay, so we're going to start there. And going back to the fact that time is finite, I don't say that to scare anybody. The fact is that we all have choices, and that's sort of the blessing and the curse of being human, the fact that we have choices, because choice is what makes things meaningful. I want to really emphasize that. Choice is what makes things meaningful. The fact that you choose over and over again to invest in certain people and in certain experiences and things, when you could be spending your time on whatever, that's what infuses those things with meaning and brings them value. So we want to be very intentional about what we choose to do with our time. So it's a new year, and it is a time for reflection. So, we always do these New Year's resolutions, January 1st. What new thing are you going to add to your schedule? I want us to, tonight, zoom out to the greater context of your time. So we're not looking at that granular thing. We're going to look at, what are you spending your time on in general? What's the big picture here? So I'm going to talk about sort of taking a bird's eye view of your life. Okay, so that brings us to exercise 1, conducting a time audit. So I invite everyone to track their time for a week. And we're going to send you a packet over email, and it's going to include some printouts. So it will have, this sort of schedule with the days of the week and the times, and it will also have some instructions on what to do. But you can choose whatever method works for you. So if you want to use your planner, or if you're digitally inclined, there's an app called Toggle. It's spelled Toggl. And it's great because you can clock in and clock out, but with the press of a button, you can categorize things. Like, it's great. Or if you just want to scribble times out on a piece of paper, more power to you, however you want to do it. But I want you to be as specific as possible without driving yourself too crazy. And you want to be realistic. So if you're, during your working time, you end up spending an hour scrolling social media, write that down. Nobody else is going to see this. Don't worry, it's only for your own assessment. But you want to be, real with it. You want to see how you're actually spending your time and not how you say you're spending your time or how it looks on paper. So the next step, and I think this is the important part, this is the reflection part, you're going to categorize each of these tasks and actions. So I'm going to show you so you have your chart here with all the different things that you do. It probably won't look this neat. This is just a hypothetical example I made. And we're going to have 6 categories. I'll get back to that in a moment. But this is what it's going to end up looking like. You're going to sort of color code it by category. So it gives you a visual representation of the different aspects of your life. Because you want to know not just what you're doing, but what function each of these actions serve. Okay? So let's get back to these categories. So I use 6 categories when I think about my time. And on the left side, you see sort of the non-negotiables. These are the things you have to have in your life for basic survival. You need to go to work and have an income. You need to do life maintenance tasks, and you need to sleep. On the right side, you have the things that I would argue are necessary, but they often get pushed to the bottom of your to-do list because technically you can live without them. It's not a great life, but you can live without them. So on the right side, you have self-care, self-improvement, and leisure. So these are the things that refuel us, that keep us motivated and feeling passionate and happy. You may have heard the quote, bread for all and roses too. Think of, the left side is bread and the right side is roses, and you need both to feel whole, okay? You need both to feel balanced. So we're gonna take a look at each of these categories in a little more depth, and we're gonna talk about, how you slot tasks into these categories. And then we're going to, go through some questions that you can ask yourself, some ways to reflect on each of these categories as you think about your time. Okay, so the first category is work. And I've chosen red to represent work. You can choose your own colors, that's fine. But when you put things in the work category, so that's going to include any time you're actively working. So if you, send a few emails for 15 minutes, you write that down. It includes all your active working time, but it also includes any work-related tasks. So if you're commuting to your job, include that in the work category. If you're getting ready for work, include that in the work category. If that's its sole function, it goes in that category. So modern work, especially during the pandemic, has lost a lot of its boundaries. And I'm sure you've come to realize that, especially if you work for yourself or you work from home, work can sort of bleed into all your hours of time, right? So take a closer look at when and how you work. For instance, do you have set hours? And if you do, Are they at a time of day when you can actually focus and maximize your time? Or do you feel you're getting distracted? And do you have control over that? Are you able to rearrange your schedule to put that at a different time of day? Are you able to rearrange your tasks maybe within your set hours? What can you do to improve that focus? Also think about, have your boundaries between work and life gotten blurred? Do you find yourself checking emails throughout the day or responding to texts all day long? It can be easy to slip into that. Is there something you can do? Is there a way you can create those boundaries between your time and your clients and your employer and your coworkers? So these are some things to reflect on when you think about that work aspect of your life. Let's move on to the next category. So the next category I call life maintenance, and it's sort of a catch-all. I use it to describe all those activities that are technically work, but unfortunately, it's the work you don't get paid for. So that's, the groceries, the chores, the carting kids around, fixing things around the house, running errands, all of that stuff. If you're doing it, to make life run smoothly and not for the sheer joy of it, that's life maintenance. That goes in that category. So once you've, sort of filled in all those instances of life maintenance, take a look at the pattern that appears. Are you sort of tackling things as they come up, doing a little bit at a time? Or are you sort of putting it off, saving it all up for, one day, and then you just do it all? Like maybe you have a Sunday cleaning and errands and all of that, like a bonanza. Either way is fine, but does it work for you? That's the big question, is that do you feel like you can stay on top of things? Does that feel manageable? Another thing you can think about is, do you need to keep up? Like maybe you can lower your standards a little bit. It's a pandemic, everyone's house is dirty, and you're not having guests over. Maybe you don't have to worry so much about it, and maybe you can do a bare minimum and save some of that time for other things that are more important to you. You decide. Okay. The next category is sleep. And so when you get this worksheet, there's going to be a slot at the bottom where you can write your bedtime every night. Because as I'm sure we all know, we've all heard this over and over again, that having a consistent sleep schedule is healthy for you. And if you go to bed at the same time every night and get up at the same time every morning, that helps with your quality of sleep. It helps you get to sleep better. It helps you wake up easier, right? But, knowing that is different from actually putting that into action. How many people have heard of the term revenge bedtime procrastination? Anyone? Yeah. So basically that's a term where when you feel like you've gone all day doing the stuff that you have to do and that you don't have a lot of control over, you end up staying up later at night just to feel that sense of freedom, to feel like you actually have some time for yourself, and we've all engaged in that. But, so note when you're going to bed each night and what is it that might be, pushing your bedtime later, if that's something you're doing. What about the other things that you're doing in your life is making it so that you feel like you need to regain that control? That you don't have that at other times during the day and during the week. Okay? So things to think about. All right, so the next category is self-care, and this can be a bit of a nebulous category, so it might require some reflection. But when I say self-care, I don't mean, the consumerist version of going out and buying really expensive candles and bubble bath and all of that. Like, these are things that you do to make you feel right, to make you feel sane. Or if you look at it in reverse, what do you do that makes you feel less anxious and stressed during the week? This could include alone time. You know, I'm an introvert. I know that if I don't get my allotment of alone time, I get very cranky and it sort of affects everyone else and everything else in my day. But this could be time in nature, exercise, meditation, maybe a beloved hobby. You know, it's entirely personal. So when you think about what you're doing for self-care, are you doing these things on a daily or weekly basis, or is it something you put off until it becomes an emergency? You know, do you allow yourself to get to that point where you're feeling burnt out and you're unable to really be present for anything? You know, when you think about self-care, it's one of those things that gets pushed to the bottom of the to-do list, but really it's going to affect everything else in your schedule. Okay, so we're moving on to self-improvement. So what things are you doing? What actions are you doing to move forward in your life, whether that's for work, health, or new skills you'd like to learn? And you don't need to think about this in terms of being more marketable or more impressive. It can be as simple as, you know, being a better friend or being a better parent. You know, we all have this idea of who we want to be. So how are we actually moving towards that? You know, if we say, I want to be a better friend, what concrete actions are you taking towards that? Do you have times allotted during your week where you know, meet a friend to hang out or check in on them or give them a call? Okay. So you want to make sure you have these things in your schedule, because otherwise you can end up getting stuck in a rut. You know, we get on this autopilot and it becomes really difficult to get out of that. Okay. All right, so our last category is leisure. So I think when we think about how this whole 24 hours was first divided up, you know, in terms of like 3 8-hour sections, you have your work, you have your rest, and you have your leisure, right? But I don't think any of us is really getting 8 hours of leisure when it comes down to it. Leisure, you know, in modern life is usually the leftovers. It's, you know, what we get after we've done all the things that we had to do, right? And, you know, we sort of have this default mode that we go into when we have this off time. And usually it's, you know, something passive and something mindless. So it can be like scrolling your phone or, you know, looking on social media or watching a show you're not even that invested in. You know, it's just, you get to this point where you're exhausted and you can't really manage to do anything else, right? So when you look at your schedule, you know, you want to make sure you have something that actually energizes you, that actually brings you joy, that you're doing just solely for the sake of the joy it brings you. Okay? Because I know when I have those things in my life, the next day, and, you know, it really refuels me. I feel like I have more creativity, more energy. You know, I interact with people better. So, you know, don't think of leisure as a selfish thing. Think of something as necessary, and it's going to enhance all those other aspects of your life. So remember that, sorry, train of thought went somewhere else. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about with leisure. So when you think about your tasks, some tasks may actually fit in more than one category, right? So you put them in the place that makes the most sense to you. So for some, exercise is self-care, but for others it might be self-improvement, it might be leisure, it might even be life maintenance. So wherever that makes sense, you slot it into that category. And so once you're done with this and you have everything color-coded, take a step back and reflect on the overall picture. So what do you feel like you have too much of in your life? And what do you want more of in your life. If one area of your life is really out of whack, remember that's going to affect everything else. So for instance, if you're not taking care of yourself and doing things that, keep morale up, especially in this time of the pandemic and it being January and it's rainy and cold, there's a lot of stuff to get us down. So we really need those things that, give us that joy and make us feel connected, right? Okay. So we can't just load up our schedules with, only productivity tasks because there are diminishing returns. So we need to be intentional about what we do. And I love this quote. It says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." And that's by Will Durant. So what is it that you do? Okay, so to illustrate this, I'm going to tell you about the origin of the name Big Rocks Organizing, which Whitney came up with. But it's based on a concept by Stephen Covey. And what it refers to is basically putting the important things first, right? So if you think about filling this jar up with rocks, and you fill it up with the small things, the small rocks first, essentially the sand, you're not going to have room for the bigger things, the bigger rocks later, right? So you need to put those big rocks, those important things first, and then you sort of fill in the cracks with all those lesser things, okay? So you want to schedule your big rocks first. Okay, so now that we've kind of looked at the larger picture, let's get back to those resolutions. You may be thinking, thinking about your schedule and thinking, oh my gosh, I have so many changes I need to make, and I don't want it to be overwhelming because you don't need to change everything at once. In fact, please don't. It's, that's not setting yourself up for success. You want to start with just one thing, and you can start with that resolution. That's something that's important to you. So you want to put that first, and you want to make sure that you reserve the time for it. Where does it fit into the greater scheme of your time? So you want to reserve the space for your resolution. So we're going to talk about how you can do that with some specific steps. So the first one, you want to find, so thinking about your resolution, you want to find the optimal time of day to do that thing. So the most obvious, starter questions are, do you need to do it outside? Do you need daylight for it? Can it be done inside? Is there a time of day that's better for this thing? But you also want to think about your chronotype. Are you a morning person or are you a night owl? If you, are a night owl and you say that you're going to go for a run at dawn every morning, that's probably not going to last very long. You're not really setting yourself up for success there. So find a time that your energy is usually higher and you can really bring your all to that thing. Especially because oftentimes when we're taking on a new habit, it's not something we're naturally inclined to do. We have to sort of force ourselves a little bit to get into that habit. So you want to make it as easy as possible. And you may need to move around some of the lesser tasks in your life. So think about those rocks. This is your big rock. You don't want to displace it with all the sand. Okay, so the next step, and I think this is the most important one, is to set a specific and consistent time and place. So you don't want to leave this thing to chance or to your motivation or mood because that varies from day to day. Even if you're a morning person, you're not going to get up every morning, feeling like 100% and you're ready to get at it. Some days you're just going to feel a little under the weather or in a funk or something. So you want to, schedule this thing so that it's a no-brainer. You just do it. No matter how you're feeling, you show up for it. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to exercise every morning, you say, I'm going to exercise from 11:30 to 12:30 in my spare room. You set up the time, you set up the place. And any other variables that you can also, set up for yourself, like if you have your outfit that you want to wear set out the night before, if you want to pick out the exercise video you're going to use, all of those things that make it easier for you to just like jump into that habit when the time comes, that's going to really set yourself up. A resolution is a new habit you want to adopt, and the more frequently you do it, the faster it will become automatic for you. So you want to get those reps in. You want to show up every time at this specific, consistent time and place. The third step is to budget enough time. So when you think about the habit you're adopting, you want to be realistic about the time it takes. So if you're just exercising at home, that's different than if you're exercising at the gym. If you're exercising at the gym and you want to get an hour workout in, well, you also have to take into account, driving there and getting dressed and checking in and all of those things. And, when it's all is said and done, maybe you only have a half hour to work out after all that. So you want to be realistic about the time it takes and make sure you reserve a space big enough for that task. Okay, and the fourth step, this is more of a suggestion because it's not always possible, but it can be very helpful to anchor the action to another already established habit. So we all have routines in our lives, right? And basically a routine is a set of habits kind of stacked onto each other. So when you think about a morning routine, it might be wake up, take a shower, eat breakfast, brush your teeth, right? Those are 4 things that you've learned to do in that order, and you don't even have to think about it. It just happens every morning. So if you can anchor your new habit to that already established habit, you're going to adopt it more quickly, because there's no way you're just going to, forget to do one of those steps. Oh, I forgot to brush my teeth. No, you've probably been brushing your teeth for decades, right? At that time. So you use that as the as the cue. Like, after I'm finished brushing my teeth, I'm going to get dressed and do my workout. And then the more you link those together, that just becomes part of the larger chunk of your morning routine. And that becomes an established habit. You don't always have to link it up to the end of a routine. You can also front load it in front of another habit. So say you're really food motivated and you really look forward to lunchtime. You can decide to do your workout before lunch, and then the beginning of your lunch hour is sort of that natural stopping point for you, and it acts as a reward for getting through your workout. So you're reinforcing having worked out. So the more you can sort of structure things so that you're linking it up with what you already have in your schedule, the easier it's going to be to adopt these habits. Okay, and lastly, you want to start small. So just because you've, say budgeted an hour for your workout or whatever it is you're doing, it doesn't mean you have to take up that whole time right away. It might take you some time to work up to doing that whole thing. But, you can start small, even if it's just a couple of minutes. Really, consistency is more important than the length of time you're doing that thing, because we're building a habit first. You want to lock that in so that no matter what, you're doing that thing on a regular basis. So even if you're just showing up for the day, that's building that habit. So even when it's an established habit, there are going to be some days when, you're just not feeling it and you only go for a few minutes. There are going to be other days when you're just ready to go and you end up working out for an hour and a half instead of an hour. That's going to even out eventually. But as long as you show up, then you're building that habit. Okay. So we talked about various things in this presentation today, but even if you don't decide to do the time audit, there are a couple of takeaways I want you to have. And the first one is to just be intentional with your time. We have a choice. Not with everything. I mean, obviously there are some things that are out of our control, but outside of that, what are you choosing? Okay. And secondly, create the space. Don't just say you're going to do something. You need to actually create the space in your schedule, something concrete, a consistent date and time, so that you actually take that action and move forward with that. So please, if you do decide to do the time audit, let us know in the Big Rocks Facebook or on social media, or send us an email. Let us know how it goes. And, if you've decided to take a next step, we'd really love to hear from you and cheer on your efforts. We're all in this together. We're all trying to make little improvements in our lives, and that really adds up over time, no matter how small we start. Builds up to bigger things as we choose it over and over again, right? Okay, so that is my presentation, and I want to open up the floor for any questions, or if you want to share what your resolution is, or ask how maybe you can integrate it into your already existing schedule, or if you want to talk about building up habits some more, I love doing that. So I'd love to just hear from some of you if you want to let me know. And Whitney, will you tell us about our upcoming presentation?
Yes, so our next quarter, the presentation will be in April, and we're going to be talking about blending families and blending stuff. We get this question a lot from folks, so whether or not you maybe have an adult parent moving in with you, or you've got a multi-generational home, or any situation where you're blending families and blending your stuff, please come, because yeah, we get this question so frequently. So I think this will be a fun one to talk about.
We had some knockdown battles about family photos that were going up and where they were being placed. So it can get very heated and intense.
It can, and we're going to share some tips on how to stay sane and how to preserve your relationships during that process. So hang in there, Jamie.
Thanks. One comment I just wanted to make is I really liked what you said, Alissa, was compare yourself to yourself. That is something that I have to remind myself to do, because I think it's really easy to get into the pitfall of looking at other professionals or family members even, and seeing their successes, and then quickly sort of looking in the mirror and feeling like, gosh, I'm not doing enough, or I feel inadequate or incompetent. But when you really look back on sort of the landscape of the past years, I think we've all grown in many different ways, and it's easy to find examples of that. And so just remembering to just sort of look at your own past and then think of your own trajectory versus others.
Thank you. You worded that so beautifully. We're all there. We all fall into that trap of comparing ourselves, that really, progress. And so don't discount that.
And as you said, Alissa, we don't know what their backstory is. We don't know what their helpers are, not their helpers, or, you know, whether they have caregiving duties or not caregiving duties.
Yes.
Or
Comparing
the
apples and
emotional,
oranges.
sorry?
Oh, sorry. I said it's comparing apples and oranges. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the emotional regulation to handle all that.
And I think, you know, everyone is trying their hardest. You know, we just all have different obstacles and different styles and different things we're up against. So,
Alissa, this was really very interesting. So much great information. I took tons of notes, but one of the things I really liked that you said was choice is what makes things meaningful. And I think we need to be really intentional on what we're choosing, because otherwise it's going to choose us. This stuff just seeps into our lives. It's very interesting. And like you said, culturally, if you're quote unquote successful, you're probably appear to be running ragged and you're so busy. And that doesn't spell success to me in my personal life or my professional life. But I really like this choice, and I'm at a crossroads too. Yeah, and a lot of times those of us that are self-employed, we do have some flexibility with our schedules. So I am going to do the time tracker and kind of reassess, where am I doing what, you know, and hold myself accountable a little bit and really see, okay, let's take a real bird's eye look again. I think it'll be good. I'm really excited about this.
yes, thank you, Elaine. That's wonderful. I look forward to hearing how it goes.
Bill.
Are you nodding yes? I couldn't tell. My main takeaway is those couple of tips about anchoring and small steps. It reinforces what I started doing not that long ago. Had a couple of cranky muscles, so I was putting in stretching and the roller tubes, foam rollers, and also practicing what I preach. Anybody do those Elevate mind game apps? You know, puzzles and math and reading and memory stuff. So trying to work the brain. Now, it can go like 5 exercises. I do only 3. So yeah. I don't want to take up my whole morning and make it into a chore, but I'm still benefiting. So yeah, I really like that suggestion.
Great, thank you, Bill. Thanks for sharing, and I'll have to check out Elevate. That sounds interesting.
It's good. It gets hard.
Well, especially Alissa, comparing your big rocks with what you're doing and how you're spending time, it really is giving you that satisfaction and connecting with what you want to do, which, as Elaine says, is your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And reminding you that those children were a choice for most of us. They are meant to give us joy. They interrupt your day 15 times asking for snacks.
Alissa, can you give us an example of a new understanding that you developed by using this process?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let me think. I think it's, you know, I feel like it's mostly been about getting out of that autopilot for me, because I think there's so many things in life that I think, Elaine, did you say, or maybe with Minda, where things just choose you? You know, if you don't make a choice, that's a choice, right? So you can just sort of fall into these patterns, or, you know, just go for years doing the same things over and over again, unless you take that time to like zoom out and see the bigger picture. And that goes for, you know, your time, it goes for, you know, your stuff. That's why I love organizing, because I, you know, want to be intentional about everything in my life, right? So I think that has really given me a perspective on like what I'm doing and when am I sort of like falling into these habits and behaviors that aren't getting me anywhere, that aren't getting me towards my goals. I don't even enjoy them much. It's just like a thing that I do. So it sort of breaks me out of that. And I think the more we can build those times into our lives, the better off we're going to be, and the more intentional we'll be about everything.
Thank you. I really enjoyed what you said about finding things that give you activities or whatever that give you joy, because then you have energy for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in a space right now where I'm trying to figure those out.
That's wonderful. And it is an ongoing process. Sometimes those things change, and it's not the same things that bring us joy, and we need to sort of evolve with that. So it's, ongoing. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I really enjoyed that. But I was thinking too, when roles change, or things in our lives really change, that kind of hit for me, like things that I used to enjoy and I don't as much anymore, and trying to find new things. And I feel like I get down on myself that I don't know what brings me joy necessarily. And so it was really helpful to think about, how we get to make choices and trying new things. It doesn't have to be the same things that brought us joy 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think the pandemic, another big part that really hit for me when you're saying work or bleeding into everything. I feel like the boundaries are blurred in my life. It just seems like everything's kind of blurring together. So having those, like, this is leisure and I do enjoy this outside of running a business or, so that was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And, sometimes it takes some experimentation. Sometimes you need to just try a few things to see what sticks and what does bring you joy now. Like I, over the course of the pandemic, got really into making dinners and just being creative with that and using that as like sort of the end to my work day and easing into the evening. So, it's okay if those things change. There's no standard for what it needs to be. And, of course, it's all subjective. So if you find that like tidying up the house is your leisure and you actually like doing it, then that's fine. That's great. You're hitting two birds or feeding two birds with one hand, as they say.
I'm glad you said that because I do enjoy tidying up. Sometimes like this brings me so much joy.
Yeah, so that should be in the leisure category. That's totally fine.
Connie,
I saw your hand up.
I have a question and then a comment. My question is, first, when you talked about sleep, you used the phrase bedtime procrastinator.
Oh, it's called a revenge bedtime procrastination.
Could you talk a little bit about
guilty.
that?
Yeah, so that's when you stay up late, even though you probably shouldn't, because you want to regain control over your time. So it's, when you feel like the rest of your day has been out of control and you're just kind of doing things you have to do, you end up staying up later just to, get your time back.
I see. Thank you. So my comment was, I'm a retired person. I still do work, but not for a living. In this last 2 years, I've found a lot of ways to add joy, but I've also had to think about how do I add hope.
I love it.
And that's just a little different. But somebody asked me about 2 weeks ago, what makes you hopeful? What brings you hope? And in this time of the pandemic and what's going on politically, that was really stuck with me. So one of the things I've tried to do is switch some of my joy, which is knitting, to hopefulness for knitting for a community program or for a shelter for houseless people or something like that. And just hoping that that extension will bring a different kind of satisfaction than just joy.
I love that so much. Thank you, Connie. That's, because joy, is sort of more present focused, and hope is it's not just what keeps us going day to day. It's like, what is the point? You know, what keeps us going overall. So thank you. I really love that.
Anyone else have a question or a comment for Alissa?
Alissa, you'd be proud of my calendar on my phone. My computer guy says,
Oh, you muted yourself, Connie.
sorry about that. But my calendar, I don't know. I don't think I can show you, but brown is for medical, green is for volunteer, blue is for mahjong, yellow is for exercise. So everything is color coded. I can kind of see where that balance is over time.
Yeah.
And particularly the exercise, my goal is to get 2 greens on every day. So that, and then I don't have to think a lot about it. It's like, oh, there's one missing. So I call a friend and say, let's take a walk, or let's go to the pool, or something like that. But it's a big help from the get-go to put it on my calendar in color. And then it really pops out at me.
Yes, that's great. You're already ahead of the game. And that can be reinforcing too. Like, I think sometimes we get to that point where we want to like check that thing off, or we want to see those 2 green bars, and so we're going to work towards that, because you get that dopamine hit when you get to do that. So that's going to really reinforce your habit more and keep you going with it. So good job.
Connie,
It's
for
nice.
for the digital people, they call that gamification, Connie.
Really?
Gamification, where you kind of create digital rewards. So the fact you've color coded it and you're trying to get the blues, you've gamified your calendar.
Wow, my 80-year-old something friends are going to think that's crazy. Gamify, huh?
Yeah, you gamified it. You have a gamification calendar system.
I love it. Thank you for that.
That's great. I think sometimes too, having that winning streak going, and you want to keep going, and that can motivate you to keep going with those 2 bars every day. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, any other last questions or thoughts on this topic? As Alissa said, please, if you try out the time audit, let us know how it goes for you. Let us know if you decide to make any changes or take small steps. We'd love to hear from you. And we'd love to have you back in April to talk about how to blend families and blend stuff. And meanwhile, you know where to find us. So if you're interested in working with Alissa on time management and productivity or home organizing, just reach out. Thanks, everybody.